And I think we gave away a copy of this book to most of the people at the conference, and it occurs to me that sometimes getting a gift of a book from an author is not always a benefit, because the next time you see them, they ask you what you thought. So I just want you to know that if you see me walking down the hallway and you haven't read the book, I'm not going to ask you your opinion, but you're welcome to volunteer it. I didn't write the book to pump the company or myself. A lot of CEO books, they consist of the CEO saying, well, I showed up, everything was all screwed up, I banged a bunch of heads together, I made some brilliant insights, everything got fixed, you should do the same thing. Or the book is, I see this great opportunity, my company has the best stuff for it, buy my stuff. If you look at the book, there's really not much mention of any intelligent management on my part at MicroStrategy. The company's pretty much run by people much more professional than myself. I give them all the credit. And I didn't really want to talk about our products. I really wanted to talk about something which is much more exciting to me as a historian in science, which has always been my first love since I was at MIT. And it's a paradigm shift that changes the world and makes it possible to improve the lives of everybody. And I think 2012 is the beginning of a very transformational era, and we call it the mobile wave. The mobile wave is all about the impact of software as vapor flowing through everything around us all the time. What happens when software is always with us? The last interesting wave was the internet wave, and the internet wave impacted less than 500 million people about 15 hours a week. The mobile wave, I believe, is going to impact 5 billion people 150 hours a week. And for those people that use software on mobile computers, you know it's 10 times easier. So whenever something is 10 times as ubiquitous and 10 times as omnipresent and 10 times easier, when it's 1,000 times better in some dimension, then I think you get massive state changes, paradigm shifts, extraordinary opportunities. And that's why I wrote the book. I think that the mobile wave is going to restructure 50% of the worldwide economy. I think it's going to sweep away trillions of dollars of inefficient processes and then replace them with something else. And the book has about 50 pages of footnotes, and one of the most fun things about it was the ability to research, or the chance to do a lot of research into the impact of software in the economies around the world, and then also do some speculation about the impact on the economy if certain business processes get changed at the macro level. This is fascinating. You know, you would never have seen this with a PC. You know, I've got on the left a kid playing the piano on an iPad, and on the right a headline, which is a real headline: the elderly read iPads 3 times faster than normal books. Well, so normally new technologies are resisted by the older generation. This is one of the first new technologies I've seen that's actually been embraced by the older generation. And of course, when's the last time you saw a 3-year-old on a Windows computer? I think the big picture with regard to the mobile wave is it's a book about what happens when there are 5 billion smartphones in the hands of people around the world. And that's not really I don't think it's a controversial prediction. I think most people would agree, and most analysts are predicting now we hit 5 billion smartphones by 2015. I read a statistic just last night that suggested that something on the order of 400 million smartphones got shipped in the last quarter. I looked at that and I blinked. I thought, is that really true? But you're seeing huge, huge volumes of these devices, depending upon how you count the device and what you include in the number. I don't think it's that unlikely that we'll have 5 billion people on the planet with a smartphone by 2015. I think the more controversial expectation, and I don't think most people would agree with me on this, but that doesn't mean I don't believe it. I think the more controversial expectation is 5 billion people are going to have tablet computers, either iPads or the functional equivalent of that, in the next 10 years. Because 2 years ago there was no such thing, but I think that it's increasingly clear that anybody that's literate of any means on this planet is going to end up with a tablet computer sometime in the decade. And I think the reason it's a decade is because that's about as long as it takes for the manufacturing plant and the component suppliers to gear up to produce this sort of thing. I think we're starting to move toward 100 million units a year, and maybe we can double again and double again. But it'll take 36 months or 48 months before we start to get the engine up where we can actually generate 500 million units and 1 billion units at a time. But I think it's coming. It's inevitable for some reasons that I outline in my book. You know, mobile is the 5th wave of computing. You know, you can see the succession of phones. But the last wave of computer was the internet wave. This is 10x bigger in 3 different dimensions. And as we start to dig into a little more deeply, just every single time you stare at something, you see another interesting factoid. For example, you know, the new smartphones are not just smaller. The average person spends 12 minutes a day making phone calls on a phone and 77 minutes a day using apps on a phone if they're a smartphone user. Now, that's a flabbergasting observation. It's really just amazing because, of course, if you roll the clock back just a few years, that 77 minutes a day went to a few minutes a day. Right? The first real killer application on a phone was SMS, and the second one was email. Maybe the third one was BBM or chat, depending upon your perspective. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of the iOS and Android, we saw the explosion of apps. 77 minutes a day. I mean, this is where the nexus of software is shifting. And with that, everything's been reimagined. So Maps, for example, Google, which was not in the mapping business, releases a Maps program. There are 150 million users, 150 million users of Google Maps. You know, for 100 years, Google wasn't a map company at all. And there was Rand McNally, and there were all these other National Geographic. And what happened when Map got reimagined? Now maps show streets, but they show traffic, and they show satellite views, they show street view, and the amount of information in Google Maps, I presume, probably would fill up this entire auditorium if we were to print it and stack it. It's pretty clear that maps aren't going back, but you look at that picture right there, and it's also pretty clear that if you don't have an iPad or a tablet computer that's comparable to an iPad, and you need a map, you're kind of living in the Stone Age. You have a choice. You can have 500 pages that weigh 20 pounds, or you can have 500 million pages that weigh 1 pound. I just can't see, I can't see an educated, literate person that's not going to want to move forward as opposed to fall back. You know, we chop down 4 billion trees a year for paper, 4 billion trees, and we've been talking about the paperless office forever. Paper is going away, and I think the book has an entire chapter on it. There's a 53% decline in ad subscription revenue for newspapers over the last decade. And it's not inevitable that newspapers need to have their subscription revenue decrease. In fact, if they were more aggressive in embracing technology, the revenue wouldn't be falling. I would say that newspapers are losing revenue because people are losing faith in paper. And if your worldview is, I sell advertisements printed to paper, and paper's dying, then your ad business is dying. If your worldview was, I provide information, and it may come via paper tablets, but it may come via electronic tablet, then in fact your advertising revenue would probably be growing. And what we're seeing is the bleeding off of ad revenue from traditional or old line, non-technically focused companies to the newer companies like the Googles or the Facebooks. But I think the picture here makes the most important point, which is we need to do it both because it's inevitable and also because, you know, who really wants to keep chopping down 4 billion trees a year? I mean, I don't see any natural constituent for that. You know, it costs $230 million a year for the raw materials that go into the New York Times. The New York Times has a circulation of 2 million. So here's a paper scratches the surface at educating the world and generates $230 million of raw material costs. And if it were 20 years ago, you would just say, well, it's $230 million worth of cost, and that's inevitable and necessary because that's the only way to do it. Today, you would look at it and say, it's $230 million worth of waste. So how long can we continue to spend $230 million to print that out as opposed to just send it to a tablet computer? I think we'll see shortly that just about every educated person is going to flip over to reading the paper on a tablet. here's an interesting statistic. 2.2 million titles get printed in the book publishing business every year. This is why I'm not expecting to get rich having written that book. 1 out of 2.2 million. But think about this one. If it's 2.2 million books are printed every year, how does a bookstore stock them all? Right? I mean, the whole concept of a bookstore kind of becomes a joke, right? Because if I actually wanted to stock one of each, I need $22 million worth of inventory a year. Nobody can afford to do that. You can see that the traditional way is not going to keep up. We can't possibly distribute the information the human race is generating through any traditional means other than publishing directly to tablets. There's 130 million distinct titles in print right now. For a $500 computer, you can presumably within the next decade have access to any of the 130 million. And of course, there's only 100 million items in the Library of Congress. So your choice is $500 that you give to your 8-year-old, or steal the Library of Congress, or not care. Maybe. We have 103,000 libraries in the United States of America. They cost $22 billion to operate. And I think they're going to be just very, very attractive buildings at best sometime in the next decade. Again, because your 8-year-old's going to have a better library in the palm of their hand. The book's about the redirection of energy, right? So you could say it's great to spend $22 billion maintaining the libraries, but what if I had the $22 billion to pursue a cure for cancer? If you had a choice, would you rather not die of cancer and read the book on an iPad, or have lots of books and lots of libraries? By the way, how many people have been to all 103,000 libraries? Right? How many people have been to 100 libraries? Right? 99.9% of all this expense will never do you an iota of good in your entire life, nor any other human being. Right? It's just a woefully inefficient way to do things. On the other hand, $22 billion spent trying to cure cancer might very well save someone you love. I think when we think about the energy trade-off, we're going to have a pang of nostalgia as we give up our libraries, and then we're going to think about the thing that replaces it, like not dying 10 years early, and we'll get over it. I'm not saying there isn't nostalgia. I'm not saying it isn't kind of unpleasant sometimes to think about what the mobile wave is going to do. It's going to sweep over the economy, stuff that we had our entire life, that we grew accustomed to, that we grew viscerally attracted to, and maybe even addicted to. That stuff is going away, but the stuff that's going to replace it is better. And I think that if we're progressive in our views, we'll see it's better, and if we can communicate that to people, they'll embrace it. I haven't picked up a remote control on a television in 9 months. You know, there's this great program, HBO Go. It's on demand. It's got every program, every movie. I just tap on it once. It plays. I don't have to figure out my remote control. I have 2 degrees from MIT. I can't figure out my remote controls. I don't even want to. So if I don't want to, and you know, you could get a better education than me, but 99% of the world doesn't have a better education than me. So if I don't want to, then what's the other 99% going to think when it comes to things like education? Not only, when it comes to things like entertainment. You know, the other amazing thing that happened just this year, in the last 6 months, is there's this blockbuster television show on HBO called Game of Thrones. And people started watching it on the iPad, and they introduced interactive content. So you watch the television show in high definition, and you get to a certain scene, you tap on it, and it shows you a map of where the people are. It traces the family tree of the people you're watching. Or it shows an interview with the actor, or it shows an interview with the director, or it even shows background by the author explaining why this was written or explaining what happened. They're all just interactive features. You can't do them with any traditional technology. I can tell you they're highly addictive, highly, highly addictive. Once you watch an interactive television show on an iPad, which, by the way, you could project onto your Apple TV or any kind of television using an Apple TV hookup. Once you do that, then it's really hard to go back. It's kind of like when you read a textbook on an iPad and you get to a word you don't know, you tap on it, it defines itself. or you tap on it and it searches and indexes itself. It's hard to go back. You know, when you have to do things the traditional way, when you carry around 500 books and they weigh an ounce, and then someone hands you a book while you're on a business trip, which kind of is what happened to you, by the way. You look at the book and you're like, could you just give me the electronic version of this? And I don't know why I can't, by the way. So we are definitely trapped in the middle of the mobile wave, because if we were at the end of the mobile wave, you would just get the electronic version. But you know, you start to look at a book as a gift, and maybe the weight of the book is as much a liability as the value of the book is an asset. You know, the most successful gaming businesses up until about a year ago were the Xbox and the Sony PlayStation. Xbox sold 67 million units. The Sony PlayStation, 62 million units. Angry Birds is a download on an iPhone and Android, 200 million distinct active users. And so we can see an inflection point again, which is games as products or games as devices are going the way of the flip phone and the digital camera and the analog camera and the tape recorder. And I don't really think there's much question that these things are going to go to zero unless they morph into something that somebody wants. It's hard to see how a single-purpose standalone device continues to grow. I mean, they may occupy a niche, but I think increasingly niched. You know, the book talks about the book's about what happens when the things we hold in our hand become software, which means credit cards and keys and cash. But what about keys? Well, I didn't make this up. These are two real car keys. The Mercedes-Benz key on the left, the Zip car key on the right. They don't do everything that the current key does, but they open the door of the car. And you can see the writing on the wall here, which is how much longer is it before the iPhone starts the car? Right? If you can start a car or open the door of a car, how long is it before the smartphone opens your hotel room or opens your apartment? And that just leads me to, I think, the next key point, which is maybe in the battle for the future, in the battle of the mobile wave, reading fantasy is more important than reading science fiction. We always lumped that together. When I was growing up, it was science fiction and fantasy. And science fiction is about extrapolating creatively in Newtonian space. What happens in the world of faster-than-light travel and warp drives, and how would you play basketball on Mars, and could you fly on the moon, and how big would the wings be, and then what would the air pressure be, and how would you design the container? And those are all really good exercises for engineers. But if you design software, a better exercise is reading about elves and dwarves and magic spells, because in the fantasy world, I can cast a spell on this key such that my kid can't use it at night. Or I can actually zap the key to 37 people. Or I can take it back. Or I could set it up so you can't drive the car on Saturday night or Friday night, but you can drive it during the day. I might actually set it up so you can't actually drive it anywhere except college and back. I can create a key that gets you into my house, but only when I'm not there. Or I can give you a key that gets you in the house, but only when I am there. Well, these are things you could do with a magic spell if you're a witch. You would never think about them if you were studying Newtonian physics. And that's the key point of the mobile wave, which is you think like software company, don't think like a hardware company. And in the software world, you're constrained by cyberspace. You're not constrained by physical or Newtonian space. In cyberspace, there's no conservation of mass or energy. The product does what you think you want it to do. And within reason, if you can conceive it, you can improve it. And one of the things I think we're going to do is we're going to be obliterating queues. There's another fascinating statistic. The average person spends 45 minutes standing in line every day. And if you look at what you're doing in line, you're just waiting for a very inefficient system to sort itself out. One of the best ways to obliterate lines is better software. One of our customers, Tesco, actually created a piece of software here. You put it on your smartphone, you walk around, you scan products you want. it drops them into your online basket. You walk out of the store without standing in line. The stuff gets shipped to your house. Wildly successful. And, this is, I'm not breaking this story. This is an old story. I think the point of the mobile wave is what happens when billions of consumers, perhaps 5 billion consumers, become intolerant of standing in line, right? If it really is 45 minutes, and maybe it's 20 or 15, what does it really matter? Extrapolate any number you want. Take half an hour, multiply by 5 billion, and then ask yourself, what could the society do with 2.5 billion hours a day of free time? Because 2.5 billion hours ought to be useful for something. And I'm quite sure that nobody's curing my cancer standing in line for the 2.5 billion hours. Right? There's so many things that need to be done on this earth. There's so much work to be done. It'd be nice if we just got on with it. And I think that this is going to drive consumer software applications in the banking industry. When's the last time you waited at a bank branch? When's the last time you waited at an ATM? When's the last time you walked to an ATM? When's the last time you waited at any office for anything? And I just think at some point the consumer gets an app that does it for them. And there's going to be this transition which goes from, why would I want to use software for this, to, cool, I can use software for this, to, my existing vendor is an idiot. They don't have software for this. I'm moving my account somewhere else. And I think that transition goes very, very rapidly, maybe over the course of 36 months, and you see massive shifts of market share. It'll be nothing and irrelevant until it's relevant, and then in 36 months, the war will be over, and there'll be a bunch of people lying dead and bloody on the battlefield, and whoever saw it coming and made the right bet is going to own the market. I think one of the things I'm very passionate about is the opportunity for mobile identity. And in fact, so passionate that I had the company create a new product which is called Usher Pro. We're going to show it to you tomorrow, and it's actually a mobile identity network. And I'm passionate about this because it occurs to me that there are 1 million organizations in the world that have obsolete, ineffective identification systems. For example, you got a Social Security card. Someone else can take your Social Security card in America and walk in and they can take a job with it. If you have a health care card, someone could take your health care card, they could imitate you or counterfeit you and get medical services. The last big innovation in the medical pharmacy business is your doctor can call your prescription in. They get on the phone, they call a pharmacist, and they call and they prescribe 50 tabs of Percocet. There's no way for the pharmacist to validate the identification of the doctor. It's a complete open hole in the entire medical system. You can dial in your own prescription of Vicodin and go pick it up at the pharmacy. They won't catch you, not for a month or 2 months until they audit the records and they start to compare insurance claims. We lose $220 billion a year due to identity theft. The fact that I can imitate you. You ever walk in a bar? Look behind the bar. Any bar has got a stack of 100 credit cards. People got drunk, they left the credit card at the bar. If you're a disgruntled bartender, on any given day, you can pick up 20 of the credit cards, walk down the street, and start to run bills on them, and you probably won't get caught. Very rarely does someone actually ask you for an identification when you use a credit card. Maybe if you're spending thousands of dollars, not if you're spending 50 or 100. So there's extraordinary fraud, waste in the system. But I write this number like this just to make a point, which is $221 billion per year. That's $221 times 1 billion, which means, given the fact that a smartphone costs about $220 in materials and components, it means I can give away $1 billion a year just on the savings from identity theft. Right? People look at that, and once you think about that, you realize this wave is crushing, overwhelming. Right? The people that are standing as naysayers or critics of this wave are overlooking the obvious point, which is all the chips and the components that go into those devices, right, are comparable to the componentry that's eventually going to go into these tablet computers. You're going to see organizations, governments, employers, all sorts of institutions, they're going to have a vested interest in driving this because the savings from eliminating things like identity theft are so huge. Now, I realize I haven't made the case that a mobile phone is going to actually be better. We're going to make that case tomorrow when we talk about Usher and other things. I will tell you the punchline, which is I think mobile credentials are 100 to 1,000 times better than your physical credentials. You can write it down and decide what you think. I just happen to have a strong view on this, strong enough view to want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in it. And I believe that, that this is going to become a major story over the next 36 months. You know, if everything's going away, one of the things we hold in our hand is cash. I think cash is, maybe it won't go away, but cash is going to be dramatically dematerialized into digital cash. And there's two very interesting bogeys here. You know, there's 2.5 million ATMs in the world. 2.5 million. Well, in a world where you can load cash on your phone and you can pay someone from your phone, why do I need any? And the second observation, and this is kind of embarrassing for America, you know, we have 367,000 robberies in the U.S. in the last year, in 2010. 367,000. And so, you know, I don't know how much money they took. I think they took a lot of money. I mean, how many people ended up in jail? How many people ended up in the hospital? How many people were traumatized? There's a massive social cost to the status quo. And so for all the people that say, well, I don't know, I'm not comfortable, well, you know, if you happen to live for 10 years in this economy, right, then that maybe you're one of the 3.6 million robberies. Right? I mean, how long do you have to live before you're going to get robbed? Right? It's kind of just frightening statistic. And, of course, there's no point in robbing someone's mobile phone. You take, if the cash is on your mobile phone and you take it, the police can track you down to 10 meters. You'd be pretty stupid to steal someone's mobile phone and try to turn it on. And if you don't turn it on, then what good is it? If you do turn it on, it's traceable. I really think there are a lot of challenges. There are political issues. There are privacy issues. There are legal issues to this dematerialization of cash, and I get all that. But 367,000 robberies a year. I think the social network is another extraordinary phenomenon. We're up to about 1 billion people on Facebook and 500 million mobile users. And I've spoken about this in the past, so I won't spend a lot of time except to say that this trend just continues to paint the world, and this is the lubricant through which so many digital products flow. These are the rails down which digital cash, digital gifts, digital vouchers, digital keys will flow. When you can flick your car key, your house key, or a $20 voucher at a friend and know that it will land in their lap in 2 seconds, I think you'll be a lot more likely to do it. You know, even today there are headlines about Egypt. We can see that social networks and mobile networks are having a big impact on this. I won't dwell any longer except to say that this is going to increase in intensity. The mobile wave is also about the impact of mobile software washing through the medical industry. You know, the medical industry generates 12.4 billion pieces of paper every year. And you got to wonder, where does all that stuff get stored? We've all seen it. And then how much of it actually gets reused? But just, this is all part of my dead tree problem, but also after you do this for about 30 or 40 years, and you start to calculate just the amount of complexity in the society, you can see how this has just got to go. And it is going. And I think it's about to go at an avalanche rate as people discover tablet computers as devices for displaying X-rays. At some point, and it may not be too distant, you're going to walk into a doctor's office and you're going to have every X-ray that was ever taken of you your entire life. And it's going to be on your phone, or it's going to be on your tablet computer, or it's going to be on a network that you can fetch, and you can just give the doctor an access code, and then he'll be able to fetch them. And you'll just think, I just can't believe we ever lived any other way. Right? I mean, something as simple as, how many times has this happened? I'm almost certain this has happened to at least half the people in the audience. You go to a doctor's office, it's a new doctor, it's a new location, you've got some issue, they go, well, we need to take a fresh set of x-rays to figure out what's going on, maybe a dental set of x-rays. How many people get overexposed to radiation in their life just because the last set of x-rays are in the wrong office or can't be fetched? If you know anything about radiology, right, or you have any concerns about x-rays being blasted into your forehead, then you would think that it's not necessarily a bad idea to keep one set and not lose them. This is a real application. People are using mobile phones as medical sensors. They're hooking them into medical service centers. They're getting advice from centralized doctors. I think we're going to see more of this, medical telemetry, and it's going to result in self-service. It may save your life. People die of cardiac arrest every year. There are indicators and there are ways to manage it. And certainly if you had a monitor with you or your loved ones all the time, you might be able to avoid some percentage of those. I think doctors generally view that there is a benefit to having immediate, constant medical surveillance. It's just that who wants to live their entire life in the intensive care ward of a hospital while they're waiting for their next heart attack? I mean, I wouldn't. On the other hand, if I could put a piece of software in an iPhone, I would. You know, the picture on the left, that's the old way, which is people tromp through the brush for 30 miles to get some medical attention, and they stand in line in the baking sun. And maybe the new way is someone actually walks up to you with a smartphone that's tethered to a service station 30 miles over the air, that's hooked into some center in Bangalore. This is an exciting development, and I think it leads us to the next real point, which is I think the mobile wave of software is our best opportunity to materially change the condition of the people, the 5 billion people at the bottom of the social economic pyramid in the world. You know, and we're going to do it because we're going to be automating out services and products and providing them in quantities of 1 million or 10 million times greater amount than the status quo. Shortly, if he's not already, the most successful teacher in the world and the most famous teacher in the world is going to be Khan of Khan Academy. He's got 4.5 million distinct users per month. If they only looked at 10 minutes worth of his teaching, then he's the equivalent of 5,000 or 4,200 teachers. If they actually spend an hour, then he's teaching for 20,000 teachers. Right? If they spend 10 hours, then Khan is worth 200,000 teachers. We're moving to the guy's got, I don't know, something like 1,500 instructional videos and 100 million viewers. I think we're moving toward a world where maybe one guy actually does the teaching work of 1 million teachers. And at the point that you can actually provide something 1 million times cheaper, I think then you've actually got a real phenomena. This is only going to accelerate. You know, and the educational world is not just ideas like Khan Academy, but educational games like Cut the Rope and Where's My Water? These two games actually teach, this one teaches mechanical engineering and rotational physics, and the one on the right teaches hydraulics. How does water flow and water pressure, and how would you design a hydraulic system, a sewer system, an aqueduct system? These are basic things that people have struggled with since the Romans and before. Now your 3-year-old can struggle through 100 levels. By the time they're 6, they may actually be a better mechanical engineer than you are. I've played these games like Cut the Rope. I can tell you that by the time you get to the 30th or the 40th level in the game, it's more sophisticated than mechanical engineering at MIT. And so you might very well find that there's some real engineering geniuses out there, and they get discovered by age 8 or age 11 or age 13. And all they need is $500 worth of infrastructure. I think the idea of games as education is very exciting because not only does this make the educational process 1 million times cheaper, but there are a lot of critics that think, oh, well, we can't really replace the classroom, we can't replace the teacher, we can't replace the institution, blah, 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 blah. I hear that ad infinitum, and I get what they're trying to say. But what they miss is there are many cases where the computer is actually better at teaching and better at certifying your competence than the teacher ever will be. Right? By the time you get to the 150th level of this game, it understands how your brain works down to 50 millisecond response times in a 14-order rotational physics problem. There's no way for a teacher to evaluate that, right? The computer evaluates it better than the teacher would, evaluates it better than the lab would. In some cases, the actual evaluation of how you would respond is so dangerous or expensive, we could never evaluate it. So I think we're going to move to a much more grand vision for what education is and what can be accomplished using computers. And as computers increasingly simulate the real world, and at some point they outstrip the capabilities to run experiments in the real world, then I think we'll see new types of talent arise from new places. And we'll harness that talent for the good of the civilization. I think certainly it's inevitable within the next few years that you'll start to see college degrees that are flowing directly out of the internet. I have a foundation called the Saylor Foundation. It's now got about 95% of the classes that you would need to get a degree from a degree training institution in the United States. It's got them uploaded online for free. Within this calendar year, we'll have uploaded everything for the top 10 degrees for biology and chemistry and physics and mathematics and computer science. I'm the first to say we're scratching the surface, but we got our own channel on iTunes University. We got 75,000 people to go see it in a given month, and we're just scratching the surface. I think that things like this are going to put increasing pressure on the entire education establishment. And again, it's not that the education establishment goes away, it's just that it's just incredibly expensive and inefficient, and it needs to be reformed. A lot of people, for those people that aren't really bulls on the iPad, I just make this point, right? It's $1,000 for high school textbooks. It's $600 for an iPad. We're at an inversion point. It's cheaper to learn to read on an iPad than it is to read on a piece of paper. Right? What public school system wants to keep paying for textbooks? I think that by the time you add up everything else, it's inevitable. We're just going to flip because those books are going to get more expensive every year. That iPad's going to get cheaper in functionality every year. The price performance is going to keep increasing. If we're not already at the inversion point, we're shortly to be. Big picture. $2 trillion gets spent on education worldwide every year. $2 trillion. And there must be 150,000 teachers that teach 8th grade algebra. 150,000 people. They do the same thing every year for 30 years of their life, and it's duplicated 150,000 times. Can you imagine the same class 150,000 times 30? We're doing the same thing. Definition of lack of progress is I have to basically walk back and forth across the stage 14 million times, and I never, ever get off the stage. That's the problem with this. I'm not disparaging teachers, right? Once upon a time, I had to actually pick up sacks of groceries and carry them out to cars and come back and carry another sack of groceries out to cars. I did it. It was a job. All I'm saying is I wouldn't be here if I was still carrying groceries from supermarkets out to cars. At some point, you have to elevate and you have to use your brain for something else. And I had aspirations to do something more than carry groceries back and forth. And I think all the teachers in the world could do something more than the same thing over and over and over again like Groundhog Day. I would rather have them all be working on curing 150 different diseases. This is one of my favorite anecdotes for the book, The Economist hired a guy to drive a truck of Guinness beer through Cameroon. He drove it for 3 days. He got stopped by police 47 times, and they stole 1/3 of the cargo. And the point is, in a world of physical product, if you actually have to deliver any good or service physically, an ATM, a mile of copper, a bunch of textbooks, someone's going to steal it, shake you down, or acts of God are going to strike it with lightning or somehow demolish it, shrink it, or undermine it. I'm not saying this is scientific. I'm not saying this is a clinical experiment. I just think it's just an incredibly powerful anecdote, and it's just a reminder is why software is better. Software doesn't shake you down for a bribe. Software never calls in sick. The software is not smart enough to do anything other than what it's designed to do. Software never harasses its subordinate, right? Software is never distracted because one of its children is ill or got in a fight with its girlfriend. I mean, it just does what it's supposed to do. Everything that requires people is subject to these inefficiencies, and they're the human condition. But, you know, if it's your 12-year-old child in a hospital and the doctor comes in drunk and mad at his wife, right? You don't really want to hear about it. And you definitely don't want that to impact the care of your child. So just because the human condition is real doesn't mean that any of us want to embrace the human condition when it results in damage to our family or our prospects. And look at this picture. I love this one. All of Western Europe and the United States rose into its current circumstances because of tens or hundreds of thousands of those things. One of the points in the book is that copper is 1,000 times more expensive than mobile bandwidth, 1,000 times more. The greatest promise in the third world is we bypass this stuff. And we just completely skip it. You don't need it. I mean, how much human effort and life has been squandered in that? Trapped. So that's a quick summary of what's in the book. There's 50 pages of footnotes. There's lots of good anecdotes. I wrote it really just to encourage people to think about how they might reimagine their own business. And I guess I would end with a thought that, you know, every company really needs to reimagine its product and services in light of the mobile opportunity. You know, it's not what have they been, but what could they be? And imagine them with a little bit of fancy and think about how you would inject magic into your product or into your service, because the most successful companies are injecting magic. You know, another interesting stat, you know, Apple Computer was 83% of the wealth creation in the S&P 500 index in the past 12 months. Extraordinary, right? The company that creates the most stuff, that reimagines the most products, is generating extraordinary wealth. I think if you look at the reimagination at Amazon, the reimagination at Google, those companies, they set a great example for us. And I think every company needs to reimagine what it's doing. And then along the lines, how can you establish a mobile connection with your customer? You couldn't do it in the history of the world. Now you can do it for the past 24 months. 48 months from now, if you haven't done it, you're probably going to find your business is headed south at a rapid rate if you have customers. I said on my Bloomberg interview, you know, like, it's not that software is going to change everything. If you own a country or a diamond mine or an oil well, maybe you can afford to ignore it. But if you have customers and they have opinions and you need them, then you can't really afford to ignore it because they care. And the way you reach out to them is through probably dozens of different mobile applications. And I can't tell you which ones. I think there's 600,000 mobile apps there in the world. But there's just lots of opportunity. And every one of you probably has 100 ideas of your own. I just like to encourage everybody to pursue all these ideas. I think the world will be a better place as we move through the mobile wave. And I think we're software professionals, all of us in this room. I think this is the greatest opportunity for software to make a difference in the world in our lifetimes. And that's why I'm excited. That's why I wrote the book. And that's why we gave you a copy. So I'm glad you're here. And thank you for everything. I look forward to seeing you as the show goes on.